All right. So this guide should have never existed. The Advanced OP 13 Emu Guide. Um, I say advanced guide instead of a masterclass because I feel like I'm going to be learning more and more with Emu as it goes on. I've put in maybe like 200 games into Emu, so I have a pretty good understanding of the deck. I feel like I have my bearings in the major matchups. I understand what the deck is trying to do and kind of like what I need to do to win most games. I'm currently sitting at about a 73% win rate with Emu. Um, the deck is very, very overtuned. It's like incredibly, incredibly strong. Um, what I would say about Emu is I don't think this deck is going to go without hits unless the OP14 decks can like keep up with Emu. I think Emu's gonna last like maybe like one or two sets at the most. Um, so you can put in the time to get really good at Emu, and I recommend it if like you have the time. But I have a feeling that this deck is going to be one of those decks that like sticks around right up until they ban a critical card, and I think that they're kind of going to ban the 7 cost stage eventually. Um, but yeah, I think Emu as is though is going to be strong up until intervention from Bandai. So if you want to get into a good deck, I think this is the one for you. If you want to put in like a lot of time into one deck and have a deck for like 6 months, this is probably the deck for you. Again, this is the OP13 version. So if in EBO3 or OP14 any changes need to be made, uh, those are not covered in the current iteration of the guide. So let's talk about an intro to the deck. What Emu really is it's the most flexible One Piece deck of all time. The deck has literally every tool to play really good fundamental One Piece that you could ever really ask for. You have you have blockers, like you have a lot of blockers, right? You have the little chump blocker. Chump blockers are always really good. If you watch the fundamentals class, I talk about the power of chump blockers, especially in metas where there's not really any removal for them, like the current meta. Um, has bigger blockers, has Mercury, which replaces itself, and has Mars, which destroys a guy. So you have a ton of blockers, right? You're very, very tanky, uh, which is good because you're a 4 life leader. So you are going to need a lot of blockers. It has good removal. Uh, it's non-traditional removal. So you have Mars, which is like a 6 cost Sakazuki, right? So just like pitch a card to KO a 5 or less, right? Unfortunately, you can't use reduction effects because it is a base 5 or less. However, in like that comes with its ups and downs, right? Like being able to KO a base 5 or less by pitching a card makes it so that like green purple went from one of the best decks in OP12 to like unplayable in OP13 because you're basically never getting to keep a guy in play, right? The other removal card in the deck is the rush guy, Nezjuro. So he is similar to Ichiji if you played Reiju, right? So most of the uptime with him, he's gonna be a 5k rusher that you play for 3 that reduces a guy 2k, right? So it's like with a Dawn, swing 6 and a 4. Like if you reduce like a Cavendish, swing 6 and a 4, right? You're gonna ask for like 2 cards or their guy, right? So you have that kind of removal. once you are looping your elders, you're going to be like it's going to be swinging 7 and reducing 2, so it's like quite literally HG, right? Um, so basically, what this means between Mars and ETG, you're going to be able to control a lot of the board, um, especially in your turns leading up to the 10 drop, right? Uh, Ultimately, getting to the 10 drop is the name of the game, and that means a lot of where this deck is really, really interesting is in the first 4 to 5 turns of the game before you can like put the 10 drop in play and like use its effect, right? So, because you're a 4 life leader, it is like a survival kind of deck. Like you do need to try and counter and like protect yourself, very similar to how Sakazuki had to. Like you had this like really, really powerful endgame, but you were a 4 life leader. So like if you got aggroed down by decks like, for example, Zoro or Rayleigh, like those are the two primary aggro decks that see play right now. You need to be like prepared to defend yourself so that you can get to like your inevitable late game where nothing can really stop you. Uh, if I had to compare this deck to any other decks in One Piece history, it would be BY Luffy and Sakazuki, like kind of a mix of the two. So Sakazuki was a deck that was like more of a tempo deck than it was a heavy removal deck, at least when it was in its prime. So you used the removal kind of as a like a means to an end. You were just trying to get guys off your opponent's board so that you can like you're the one that gets to press with the attacks, right? And that's very similar to how this deck uses its removal, right? It wants to make sure that you can clean up the opponent's board mostly so that you can turn all your guys sideways when they're 7Ks with the Jupiter. So getting board control with this deck is mostly just so that you can convert your bodies with like a Jupiter or like do your combo. And then obviously the deck has similarities to BY Luffy in that you are going to be cycling towards getting your guys in the trash that you need. You need to like set it up so that you have all your resources. And very similar to Gecko Moria, the 5 elders like revives your board and then gets you into like the mode where you're pretty hard to kill, right? Like with the 2 blockers and like one of them replaces itself and like you clear their board. It's same but different to BY Luffy that like became a big leader behind some blockers, right? So it's like, yeah, you're not a big leader, but like you put up 2 blockers, one of them draws a card, one of them kills a guy, and then you're like likely to find a radical beam, right? So you're actually it's actually like very similar in the kind of end game. And a lot of the decisions you make prior to that is similar to BY Luffy in that you have to like work your way backwards, like play your searchers to make sure that you have the right guys in your trash and like you play around putting by pitching your guys that you need in the trash and like playing out your guys in the right order to get like the most tempo out of them before you start looping. It's like very, very similar in kind of gameplay. So if you haven't seen my previous BY Luffy guide and you're kind of having trouble with sort of how the gameplay works for this deck, I also recommend giving that guide a look. Um, but yeah, we're gonna get really, really into it and talk about kind of the decisions you need to make with this deck and kind of how you navigate to probably as close to the most unbeatable endgame that any deck has ever had in One Piece. Um, so yeah, you have pretty much everything a deck could ever want, right? You have removal, you have rush, you have blockers, card draw, good searching, good counter events, dawn cheating. You can even cycle with like the leader skill, like Sakazuki. You can even cycle from the board. Like cycling from the board, I know sounds kind of weird because like you're giving up your own tempo, but when you think about it, think about how many times your opponent has the ability to like attack into your rested guy like twice or three times, and like you just have to let it go, right? Um, so that you can at least like get a life card or something, right? With this deck, you can swing with your guy and you can sack it off. So there's like almost no downside to attacking if you're in a position where you need to like sack off your guy. Either you swing with the guy, it absorbs a hit. Either you swing with the guy and you'd counter to protect the guy as if it was your leader. So no harm, no foul. Or you can swing with the guy and sack it off. Like that's just incredible, right? Um, and yeah, so it basically just has every tool. And because it has every tool, the deck can do kind of everything. Um, if you need to play as a control deck, you can 100% play as a control deck. You can even starve people. Uh, Starving people in One Piece was like very, very limited in what decks could actually do it. But because we literally have access to everything, we can starve people very efficiently also. And you can even be a full aggro deck if you need to be. For example, against like Ace. If you give Ace too much time, they they get to build like a huge wall of big blockers, right? And like kill you with a Roger eventually. So you can actually be an entire aggro deck against them. And being able to like do both very easily is what makes this deck so strong. You just need to understand what your opponent is doing, what their curves are like, how you can like best exploit those decks. So really understanding Emu is like you need to understand all of the other decks in the meta. Very similar to how Teach needed to know what other decks could do so that it could use its leader skill. You need to know what other decks can do so that you can optimally cycle and play out your hand to get to the best possible position to start using your leader and start using your five elders, right? Like you need to get to the perfect end game, and you can do that with this deck, right? You just need to know what everyone else is doing. So having good understanding of all the moving parts, like knowing when to block, knowing when to swing, knowing when to cycle from your board, knowing when not to cycle from your hand, knowing when to cycle and trash off your one drop searcher after you've played it, which most of the time you do it, but like sometimes you don't do it. Um, you just need to really understand all of the different little things here so that you have really good success with email. Okay, cool. I know that was a little long-winded for literally slide one, but there's so much to talk about with this stuff. So I just wanted to get a little bit kind of out there. So anyone have any questions at this point? Because I know I kind of talked about a lot of stuff. Um, if not, I'll just keep going. Uh, so what the deck isn't, because this deck can do so much, there isn't really what this like. There isn't really much that this deck can't do. Um, so really briefly, I just wanted to go over like a couple of things that the deck can't really do. Um, you can't always play control because the deck doesn't really have a way of dealing with like larger characters outside of like playing Stussy. So if your opponent is playing a deck that can like overwhelm you with a big board, you do have to kind of like move towards a win condition. You can't just like stall forever. Against like any like little character deck, you could definitely stall forever, but against a deck like I don't know, against like Ace, for example, you can't stall forever. So just having good understanding of that means that like against some subset of decks, you need to be the aggressor, right? Um, and then Emu can't really deal with everything through KO protection well. So Koshiro blocker Tashigi can be a problem sometimes. So understanding that against like, for example, Zoro, uh, you can't always remove their stuff because Koshiro blocker is really annoying. Or versus Bonnie, if they can manage to get down like a Tashigi, You can't like rely on even something like Stussy to deal with like a 9 cost Zoro. So you need to play matchups that can either really protect their stuff or like you can't kill certain things. Like you need to play those as like an aggressive deck, right? So just having that kind of understanding. Uh, so the deck's strengths, um, it's incredibly consistent. So when you look at the deck list, you'll realize that really quickly. But the deck plays 12 searchers. The deck has a leader skill that cycles a card. Every card in the deck pretty much is searchable, including your boss. Um, you have War Curie, which you like spam throughout the game pretty much. Like I would say most of the time you're getting like 6 or 7 draws from War Curie throughout a game, right? Like three, I would say like 3 times from the 10 drop, and then like at least 2 or 3 times from actually playing them. So you draw a lot of cards. There's actually a lot of games with this deck that you get to like sub 10 cards in deck, right? So having good understanding of how consistent you are and like you can play for like every like you with this deck you're not playing your hand most of the time, you're playing like your entire deck. So yeah, you really need to be aware of that, right? It's so consistent. You'll have access to everything. You just need to play your as close to the stock 50 as you can. This deck is almost all in-game decisions and not really tech cards. There isn't really even much room for tech cards. I would say the deck is like 44 to 46 cards solved, just because of the deck is like so tight on space, right? So it's like even if there was room to add cards, like you have to be really like there isn't really much room, right? And even if you do, it's like it's not really gonna impact too much. Maybe something like Stussy could help, but even then, it's like I'm really not a big fan of the Stussies. But it depends on like how the meta kind of shakes out, right? So it's like, and even then, cards like Stussy like are pseudo searchable in this deck because you can like thin your deck out to the point where you can like set up your next like draw or two with like Saturns once you've like thinned out your deck. Um, so even like non-searchable cards are like somewhat searchable. The deck is versatile. It's able to like shift game plans if something isn't working. Like if you're playing a if you're in like a scenario where like you're playing like against a slow deck and you need to be aggressive, but like being aggressive isn't working at this point in time because he's got like stabilized or whatever. Like you can like switch and play for like value, right? And not many decks can really do that. Like not many decks can really shift because a lot of the times like what you have to do is kind of like understood. But because this deck can do everything, if you can see that something is not quite working out, you can kind of like switch your plan and play towards that instead. Um, if you think you're not going to be able to race your opponent's board, then you can try and control it. If you think you can race their board, you can like almost map out how many turns and how many cycles of the 10 drop you're going to need to kill them and kind of like what they could have to prevent you from killing them, and you can like almost work it all out with Emu. The one issue I have with this deck is it might even just go to time due to how much you have to think. So like I feel like if you're gonna play this deck, you need to play a ton of repetitions so you have like good understanding and like take less time on the decisions because the thought process in this deck can get pretty damn deep. Um, the deck cheats a lot of Dawn. So another really powerful thing that any deck can do in one piece is cheat Dawn. And this deck cheats an insane amount of Dawn. The 7 cost stage is a really busted card. Um, like you get to play all your guys for 3, Like at least like once per turn, you get to play one for free, one for three. So even like saving that one Dawn on your four drops and which lets you swing six, like that's big. Or like on your seven Dawn turn, letting you play a four drop and then anything, right? That's just like that's great, obviously. Um, but where it becomes really, really powerful is when you put in the 10 drop for three, right? Putting in the 10 drop for three is so dumb. Like it's so unbelievably stupid because what you can do once you've cheat the 10 drop into play is every single one of your guys that's in play already can get some Dawn and swing, right? So you can get really good numbers just swinging with your board. Um, you can leave up Dawn for events. You can search. Something that I do a lot with Emu in particular is like I will swing like if I have nothing in play going into my 10 drop turn, I will play my 10 drop, play out the rusher, swing with the rusher, sack off the rusher to draw a card, and then I still have all this Dawn to like play another rusher or play another Workury or play another Saturn, right? And just like fill up my board again while replacing the guy that I just got a free 7K swing with and like maybe killed a guy with too. Like it can get really, really dumb really, really quickly. And another common scenario, because this deck has so few, or because this meta has so few removal cards, there's stuff that you can do in this meta, like against like Ace or Roger, you could just play the 10 drop standing for three, right? You can like play the 10 drop standing for three, play like a Workury and leave up some Dawn and you know, like this is like super, super strong if your opponent like wants to like tax beard you for a turn, or they spend their turn playing a 9 drop Whitebeard and like you couldn't get good swings anyway, right? So if your opponent wants to do all that kind of stuff, you're just like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna like put my 10 drop into play behind some guys and like you have to deal with my board and then you have to deal with my 10 drop and then like if you red rock my 10 drop and I just put another one in next turn and do my whole combo anyway, like you know, it's really not it's like a very much damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of thing. And yeah, like being able to just cheat into play so much mana every turn. Like you're with the stage cheating in the 10 drop, you're paying 4 mana for 30 mana. Like it doesn't make sense how strong it is, right? It just doesn't make sense. And like I guarantee that the 7 cost stage is getting banned at some point. Um, but yeah. It's also got an overwhelming win condition. Okay? And what I mean by that is once this deck starts doing what it's doing, other decks are not keeping up with what you're doing. Nothing in the game is going to be strong enough to deal with repeated waves of summoning 5 7K swings every turn. And like all of them replace themselves and like two of them kill guys, one of them buffs up the whole team, one of them draws a card, one of them searches a card, and then next turn you do it over and over again. Once you get to that point, nothing's really stopping you, right? Like they might have like one turn window, like the very first time you do it, to like maybe try and push through, but once you've done it twice, most of the time they're just dead, right? So yeah. Uh the deck has like the most unbeatable late game, right? And because you have the most unbeatable late game, uh, if you can get to like the 10 Dawn turn plus, I would say in most of the matchups it like very heavily favors you. So yeah, just having a good understanding that your win condition is like the de facto end boss of the game, right? Means that your opponents are always going to be like the one that has to kind of press the issue against you. which is really good, right? If you can get your opponent to like overextend and then you punish them with this deck, like yeah, it's crazy. Like the 10 drop is as close to the game has like as a sweeper too. It's just like it's so dumb. It's so unbelievably dumb. Um, and then yeah, once you get to 10 Dawn, you're incredibly tanky. Um, like you get out of two attacks, you deal with two guys, and you're likely to find like radical beams and guard points, right? So like it just gets worse for them, right? You're so hard to kill once you're at 10. Um, yeah. The deck does have some weaknesses. I am going to really go over each one of these weaknesses, and these are the five kind of things that I've found that the deck could struggle with at some point. Um, it is weak to specifically the Magellan card, and I said Dawn Manipulation because it's like um, something like a Hell's Judgment trigger to Dawn -1 you could like really screw you up, right? Or like a Magellan or any of these cards that just slow you down like one turn. Often that one turn is enough for these like aggressive purple decks to kind of get off the ground, right? So because of that, just understanding that that is a weakness means that you need to like make sure that you are kind of prepared for it. Like you need like a plan. Like okay, if my opponent drops Magellan this turn and I can't play my 10 drop, like what am I gonna do? Usually, I would say the answer to these kind of Magellan decks is go first and play your one cost stage. Just so that you can get your 10 down a turn early if you're in like a stable enough position. And I go over the decks like the decks going second curve is so strong. If you go first, you can do the decks going second curve going first with the one cost stage. So if you're playing against any of those matchups where the one cost stage, like if your opponent can like mess you up and you need the extra mana cheat of the one cost stage to like let you win the early game, then yeah, that is an option for you. So that's like the Rayleighs, the Rayleighs, the Limbs, the Ploofies, like these kind of aggressive decks. You can kind of like take the one cost stage and like flip it on their head, right? Because they're trying to slow down your 10 Dawn turn or beat you before your 10 Dawn turn. You're kind of just like using your super strong going second curve going first to kind of just like shut them down, right? Uh, Deck's weak to 9 cost Sorrow. Uh, you can play Stussy to deal with the 9 cost Sorrow, and like that is completely an option, right? So if you're playing against one of those decks that can play the 9 cost Zoro, think about it like this, right? So you have the 9 cost Zoro in the deck. Uh, they need to they can still play like Tashigi or something to like mess it up, right? So what I recommend is against 9 cost Zoro decks, instead of giving them the opportunity to easily play the 9 cost Zoro and like you play like a long game with these decks, so like any like red green Luffy or Bonnie or any of these kind of like cheesy green decks that are just trying to get out 9 cost Zoro fast. I honestly recommend that you just take like an aggressive approach with like Saturn, Mars, Jupiter and kind of just try and beat them down and don't really let them get to the point where they can easily drop the 9 cost Zoro. So just yeah, have the understanding that they're trying to do that. Pressure them to the point where they can't comfortably drop the card, or if they drop the card, they're getting punished for it. And then, yeah, because you can very likely survive one turn of the 9 cost Zoro, no problem, maybe even two. Um, but you want to make sure that when they do it, like you're closing out the game. So yeah, don't give those decks any breathing room. Um, weak to pudding. Okay, so weak to pudding. Um, so because pudding is so present in the meta, Ace plays like two on most of their deck lists. Understanding that you are weak to pudding, if you take um like take how you would want to take, I would say, means that you need to play around pudding from kind of the start of the game. Just because pudding is like so strong against you, right? Like pudding will put counter events back in your deck. So if you left up Dawn, uh like it could screw you over by not giving you like you played off curve so that you could keep the event up and then like they could just get rid of your event, right? So if you plan to use the event to keep damage, pudding screws you over there. Uh you're a deck that needs specific cards in your trash. So if the cards are in your hand, you planned on using them for counter, pudding can get them in your trash. Uh pudding avoids you getting them in the trash, right? So you need to like play out your guys or pitch them aggressively to the skills to get them in the trash where you need them to be, right? Um, or even just because like your opponent attacks you 9 as ace on turn 2, and if you didn't have an early blocker, you need to like play around the pudding somehow, right? So it's like not really that easy. You have to give them like two cards, an event and a card, and like you don't really want to do that. I would say most of the time you're supposed to just like take that hit if you're like absolutely have to. But one of the tricks I found that you can do to play around the pudding is because pudding has such a unique timing in the ace deck, there's only like really two turns that your opponent can like play the pudding before pudding has become too weak to play. And that's like the 5 and the 7 down turn, right? So a trick that I found is if you have a one of the one cost searchers, like the character searcher, because that one requires you to trash a card, normally with the intent of your leader cycling that guy off, right? Um, you can use that as like a token on the field that you can like cash in for a card in the future turn. So you like play it, get your search, pitch your card. So now you're down a card to play around putting for a turn, and then you don't cycle that one, you just cycle a different card so that after your opponent has passed the like putting window, you can cycle the one cost after that to play around putting. I've also found that keeping that the one drop up in the mirror can sometimes be useful so that your opponent can't like get a good Shirahoshi off on you. But that one's a little bit more niche. This one I think is just like you can play around the putting with this like pretty easily. Um so yeah. Have to counter against blue decks a little bit more aggressively than you would like to because of putting, and like forces you to make weird plays to play around putting. Like even stuff like how you would like to normally put in a Saturn on turn 2 with the stage. So sometimes you're gonna put in a War Curie instead because like you play around putting by not immediately getting the card back. Just stuff like that. Stuff like little tricks like that you have to do just to play around putting. And once you get used to all of them, like the weakness of pudding that the deck has, like kind of sort of like mitigates itself, right? Um, okay. So weak to Roger the card. Okay, 10 drop Roger. Because we're a deck that like wins in the late game by spamming multiple blockers. Uh, if you're not careful, you can get killed by a Roger. Most of the time, this is coming specifically from Ace because they can also put up the pressure behind the Roger. So, what you kind of have to do against Ace is you need to keep yourself like a little bit higher life total, like I'm saying around 2 life, so that when you inevitably grind your opponent down to zero, which happens pretty frequently against ace, say you're at 2 life, you only have to counter out of like one 12k swing and one 6k swing, right? So they swing six with the leader, and then you counter out of the six, and then you counter out of the 12. If your opponent has another 12k in play in the Roger, your opponent can't get through, right? So you kind of want to put your opponent in those kind of positions where they can't get through with the Roger, because like once you're at 1 life, you're very vulnerable. And if you can somehow get to the late game with like 3 life, then you're basically immortal. Like you're so hard to kill. They would need like 3 10 drops in play, maybe even four before getting down the Roger, right? And trying to do that is just like good luck, right? Um, so yeah, to play around Roger, you kind of just need to keep yourself healthy and make sure to cash in your other blockers and stuff prior to your opponent getting value with the like I would rather like sack off like my like block with like my chump blocker than use my event so that I can like keep the event or when I need to play around Roger in the late game. So just like really be aware, okay? Being really aware of where you can kind of be weak is very, very important with Emu. Just because the deck itself is so strong, you need to just make sure that you can play around kind of your weaker scenarios. And then, yeah, the deck isn't really weak to anything in particular. It's just weak to sometimes some of these things can sometimes some of these things could happen, right? Like sometimes someone's gonna try and exploit you with a 9 cost Zoro. So now that you know that 9 cost Zoro is a thing that a green deck could do to you, you should like be a little bit aggressive. Or against the blue decks, like if your opponent now you know that like even like ace is just trying to pressure you so that they can put in you, like you're gonna counter a little bit more aggressively, right? Normally against those kind of decks you would want to take to have like a bigger hand, but like because ace is like full in on putting, you need to kind of play around it. So yeah. Now that you know kind of what the weaknesses are and how to play around them, should help a lot with the deck. Um, all right. Next, next slide. Uh, the deck itself. So this is my emu deck that I'm playing right now. Um, quickly want to go over the the cards. So non-negotiable, 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 non-negotiable. The amount of these, at least two, I would say, is non-negotiable. I've played around with four. Um, so really, like your flex spots are like extra 2Ks, chump blockers, Stussy, more guard points, right? So because like you're already at like 44 cards non-negotiable, you need to kind of understand what cards we're putting in as the tech slots and why. Let's start with like some of the tech slots. Shirahoshi is one that I think is really, really key. Um, it's very similar to a like a Bonnie Searcher, right? And that you can play it at a certain time to force specific actions from the opponent. And for example, like if your opponent is playing like ace and they Jozu back their 2 1 drops, like a good Shirahoshi can really screw them up because like now they don't have something small to like throw into the Shirahoshi and you can get like a free discard for one, right? Um, in the fundamentals class, I've said a Dawn or 2 Dawn is worth a card. So to get 1 Dawn to trade for 1 card from your opponent is always a good deal. And because it's a looming threat, your opponent has to put an attack into it. If your opponent has to put one of their real attacks,
like a leader swing into the Shirahoshi, then the Shirahoshi like did a better job than any other 2K would have, right? So already we're like looking at 2Ks that are generating us like good card advantage, right? Um, the chump blocker hasn't always been in the deck. It is an in archetype chump blocker, but like it hasn't always been in Emu decklist. Why I like this card is in the mirror match, I think it's really, really strong because that's one of the matchups where you get to play the one cost stage. And because it's a matchup of the one cost stage, the two cost blocker goes to one cost. So that's like obviously very good, right? One cost blocker with counter that also like trashes a card is like really, really good. Um, it protects your life from getting like hit from Jupiter, protects your board from Jupiter, protects your board sometimes if they only have like one swing, it protects it from Nezjuro. Jump blocker is really, really good. Against Ace, I also like it going first. I find that it fixes a lot of the problems I have with Ace matchup going first. If I can play the jump blocker on my 3-Dawn turn, and I'm expecting my opponent to swing only like 6 at me, right? I can use like a 2K, protect my life, have a chump blocker in play, and then I can use this chump blocker in the future to get out of a 7, meaning that I don't necessarily have to leave up Dawn for an event on a specific turn if I want to have a more powerful turn. So being able to like front load my defense against Ace is really good. Um, and yeah, those are the two main reasons I like the chump blocker. Extra 2Ks. So I have 11 2Ks in mind, and that's mostly just because Ace going second is going to swing 2 to 3 6s at you. So just having a cheap 2K to like get out of it without having to leave up Dawn, I found is pretty important. And then in the mirror, the late game comes down to getting as many 2Ks as you can so that you can counter out of like you're gonna need to counter out of at least 3 7s to 4 7s at one point, right? So just building up a multitude of 2Ks is really, really key. Okay? Um, but yeah, like there isn't really much room for tech either way. You could like trim down here to play more chump blockers. You could like trim down these to play more guard points. You can like play the GARP event if you want like a non-engine defensive card. You can play Stussy. You play like the Sabo 2K, right? But like we're really like reaching like you don't they're like you can play VB too like if you want an even cheaper jump blocker. But like I said, we're like really reaching. Like you don't have much room for the tech cards, and you can and like all the different tech cards you would want to play in this deck more or less kind of do the same thing. I know one of my friends was on Barrier, which is like the Rebecca defensive event from like OP4 plus 4K if you have 15 in trash. Um, and it's like even that is just like more pseudo copies of never existed, right? Like a worse never existed. But even then, like that's the kind of card that you're looking for, right? So you're just looking for more stuff that lets you stay alive, basically, because the deck's core does everything else, right? So it's just like any other like tech is mostly just to stay alive. Or like help you stay alive or like save a card or two somewhere along the lines, right? Like that's what you're looking for with this deck. But yeah, that's the deck list. So yeah, some of the techs, right? So like I said, Stussy is a tech card that you can play. This is mostly, I think, for 9 cost Zoro. It sometimes is helpful against Ace if you go first. But even then, against Ace going first, you still need to, like, if you play Stussy in your deck against Ace, the entire way you play going first has to change. because it goes from like trying to pressure when you're going first to blockering up and defending as much as you can so that you can play Stussy when you're at like 3 or 4 life. Because the turn that you play Stussy, you don't get to develop any more defense and you're tapped out. So you need to like really be healthy to play Stussy. Otherwise, like a good Roger or a good player is just gonna play like Roger and swing and put you down to like 1 life, and then you've already used your Stussy, and you know. I'm losing my edge. That's the GARP event. So if you don't know what the GARP event does, it's a 1 cost counter that blocks for 1k and then adds a cost 3 or less black card from your trash to your black character card from your trash to your hand if you have 10 or more. It includes itself, so similar to Tempest Kick, if you have 9 and you play it, goes to your trash, you have 10, then you get to add. Um, so most of the time you're getting back a 2k, so it's like a pseudo 3k event that you can like split up into 2 attacks. So that's mostly good in the mirror match because in the mirror you're going to be swinging a lot of fives at each other in the early game. So being able to use I'm losing my edge to get out of one 5k swing and then get another card to get out of another 5k swing is like pretty good. Um, and then in like other matchups, it's just a guard point. Sometimes, very rarely, you can use it to pick up like a searcher or something from your trash, like the 1 cost searcher or like a chump blocker, so that you can like use it on the next turn. But very rare scenarios. I mentioned Shirahoshi. Why I like Shirahoshi. It's just a card that like lets me trade 1 card for 1 card from my opponent's hand, and then if I time the card correctly, uh, I can get I can like use it to save an additional card because my opponent's gonna have to swing into it. This comes up in the mirror match, and this comes up against Ace, and then it comes up against Roger if they didn't have Shanks or Buggy. Like if they ramped with the spell instead of Buggy, like Shirahoshi can also punish Roger really, really good, really early. But the other 2k options are the 6 cost Savo. So this one is the 6 for 6k blocker that costs 3 if you have 15 or more cards in your trash. This one is like a tempo one. So this one is like pretty decent. You can like put this guy down. If like your engine's already running, you can like put this guy down for 3. Um, Maybe get like a free block with him because he is a 6k blocker. And then maybe attack with him. But the uptime on this card is like pretty small because a lot of the times you have better blockers and better 2Ks. Overall, the card is pretty good though, so if you haven't given it a try, give it a try. Like you can use it as more of like a tempo option if you want to like lean more into the deck being a tempo deck. Um, Bartolomeo is another 2K counter. This one is just a 2K counter that is a blocker. It always costs 3. So if you want to just have like a cheap blocker, that is a 2K. That is an option. And then for other cheap blockers, there's the 1 cost Vivi. Um, 1 cost Vivi versus Charlos. I like Charlos a little bit more just because one of the key things I want to do with Charlos is if I'm going second, I play Charlos on turn 1 so that if my opponent attacks me 9 with their ace leader, I can just block and not be afraid of getting puddinged all that game. And then other than that, like I'm not blocking the swing going first when I play the Charlo. So it's just a little bit more flexible later in the game because again it's a 1 cost blocker. But
Um, I personally think Charlos edges it out just a little bit um, because like it helps you a little bit, right? And like mills a card, right? And the uptime of it being good is a little bit earlier, right? So is this live or pre-recorded? Does that answer your question? Um, okay. Yeah, so the deck is like really limited on tech options, both in space because you're playing for everything, and actual options because you're like leader locked to playing certain cards, right? Yeah, I know you can ask questions. Um, Trust me, if the deck wasn't leader lock, I'd play like Finger Pistol. I think Finger Pistol would actually be sick in this deck. But yeah, you can't, so you can't. Um, and there really isn't anything else that you can play for tech cards because the emu cards do what any other tech card you would put in more efficient than any other tech card. Like, if you wanted like a Rob Lucci effect, there's already one for emu if you wanted it. Like really, like the deck just has all the different things you could like ever really want. But yeah, okay. Mulligans. Um, Going first, I'm looking for either of my one cost searchers or my two cost blocker or Saturn. Um, I would say acceptable hands include any one cost searcher and then a Saturn. Um, you do have uh, two draws per turn and three cycles to find the Saturn, even if you miss even if you miss it going first, but uh, you definitely want at least one cost searcher. So if you have a hand of like two one cost searchers and like a chump blocker, like I'm not gonna throw that away looking for a Saturn. Um, but if I have a hand that's like just Saturn, like Saturn's uptime is like turn three onward. So I'm missing out on like not having like a blocker on turn two, so I'm probably just gonna have to like leave up Dawn, um, or like swing eight, which is something that's like a reasonable play against ace two. Um, but yeah, a lot of the times you need to get your trash to seven so that your guys don't get removed by card effects. So yeah, you really need at least like one searcher to make sure you get to seven by turn three. Um, and then going second, um, Saturn Mars is like the curve that you're looking for in pretty much every matchup when you go second. So if you have a hand of like Saturn Mars going second, just keep that shit. Um, Other than that, like you're looking for the same cards you'd be looking for going first, right? Um, Cards you're generally looking for are Saturn. It's kind of like the heart of the deck. It's like the Zoro Juro four cost for any of the purple Luffy decks. You just kind of make sure that you have your pieces, and then like he replaces himself, and like he can attack. Like he's good. He's good for board control. He's good for chip damage, and he replaces himself and like gets you towards your like end game combo. Like every deck would play a Saturn if they could for their archetype, right? So because that's the case, Saturn is like the heart of the deck, right? We're getting to the point where our one cost searchers in this game are like kind of mid. So now like we want like searchers that are like attackers too, right? Um, but yeah, uh, hands without Saturn do require you have multiple good cards, like I said. Um, yeah, like your curve would need to already be like super super good to like not have a Saturn. Um, then the one cost searchers are very important. You need to get the seven in trash. Uh, and then 10 for like some of the other effects. So so like you need searchers to fill up your stuff to get ready to go. Um, then yeah, finding a good curve with Emu is important. So like if you have a four drop and you have like say like you're going first and you have like a four drop and then you have like like another four drop and then something else you can put into play on seven Dawn, like that's already good enough curve that like you can consider keeping that already. So like or like at least like digging to find and fill in the blanks on those kind of turns so you can get a good board. Because if you have like control of the board as Emu and like are doing your thing and like actually playing the game, filling out your board, you're going to be able to play the game. Like you're gonna get to the late game like a lot stronger, right? And if this deck gets to the late game without being like crippled, 1 to 2 cycles of the 10 drop will put you right back in the game. Very similar to BY Luffy with the Gecko Mario. So if you're not like completely fucking crippled going into the late game with BY and you got to play like 1 or 2 Marios, you won. It's very similar to this deck. Um, so yeah. Like I said, four costs are very important because they let you have double character turns. Any questions kind of so far on the mulligans? Or like kind of key cards? Before we get to the actual key cards, talking about all the different kind of pieces, what they do. Um, Saturn's your searcher, Zoro-esque. Finding these and attacking with them get you a lot of value. Um, Especially in this deck too, because like you can like play it, search, swing with it, and then sack it off and buy back your card. It's like a Sanji's peel off that also got a card from your opponent's hand. Super, super strong. Um, Mars for 3 Dawn. Conversely, for 5 Dawn, if you're playing the one cost stage. Um, Very, very good card. Just a blocker that kills a guy on curve. Nuts. Jupiter. Jupiter is like the most important of the elders, I would say, once the game is like going, because it means any like two elders that have stuck on the board represent getting like 4 cards from an opponent, right? So, because that's the case, understanding how strong Jupiter is, it's like if you're snowballing or like you're winning the board and you play Jupiter, like you're winning. Like that's you need to understand that with Jupiter. Like if you can push an advantage of Jupiter and like get a bunch of cards out of your opponent's hand, your opponent now has to deal with your board, and then you get to swing with the Jupiter, and then the turn after you get to play your 10 and like on that turn when you swing with the Jupiter, you get to sack it off and play your 10 drop. Like your opponent has to deal with your aggression before you even are like doing your thing. Like that's so broken. So so yeah. Uh any like snowballing lets Jupiter convert your board into like a win. Right from the get-go. Like right before 10 like before even 10 down turn. And the Nuzjuro Rush isn't something that's common to black decks. The rush cards that black has had available have been kind of pathetic. Like I think the one example I can even think of is like the 6 drop Rabluchi from OP3. Like black just doesn't have rush, right? So being able to have not only having a rusher, but having like a good rusher means that this deck like for 3 Dawn can put in a 7K rusher. That's like better than Kid and Killer when you're trying to close out games, right? Um, more I, the more I like think about this deck, the more stupid it gets. But like it's like lets you board control, lets you lets you like pressure opponents. It's a finisher. Nesjuro is amazing, right? Nesjuro is amazing. And then Workury, it's a blocker that draws a card, right? How nuts is that? That when you play your 10 drop, you get out of one of their attacks for free and then you get the draw card, right? So like the 10 drop itself requires a discard, yeah, but like not even including the five guys that you put in play, um, which is crazy to even say. One of them gets you a card back when you block, and one of them gets you a card back right now when you search, right? So it's like when you play the 10 drop, it's like completely neutral for you, like hand wise. And you get out of two attacks for free. So very often when you start looping the 10 drop, your hand size goes up by two every turn. And it's so dumb. It's so dumb. Um and yeah, a lot of that's just because of like Mercury Saturn, right? That's so stupid. Uh the combination of all of them together is crazy, but like how understanding how to like get the max value of each of them is like really going to be the key to success because I mean they're the guys that you fight with. Like you're playing Saturn, Mars, Jupiter, Nazgûl, Mercury more than any other card in the game when you play this deck, right? Like you play each of them like like 4 or 5 times in a game. So get very familiar with them, right? Get very familiar with what they can do. Um, so yeah. So yeah. Um, the only real pros and cons I could say is X incredibly consistent, and Five Elders is more powerful than anything else you can do. Emu's just gonna win a lot of games for free just because nothing else can really keep up with it, right? The cons though is it's very easy to make mistakes with this deck because there's so many moving pieces, a lot going on at the same time, and it's so easy to leave value on the table if you don't know how to play around certain cards or like realize, okay, like my opponent's not going to be able to get any damage in against me this turn because I have my two blockers and they only have like one attack plus whatever rush they could maybe play. Like they're not going to get any damage in against me this turn. I should probably just allocate all of my Dawn to attacks, right? So just understanding how to get the max value about all your stuff is going to be the key to winning with this deck. Okay, so yeah, don't fuck it up and learn how to min max like crazy with this deck. Um, and that. So let's talk about the curve. Going first curve is just like you play your searcher. Um, doesn't matter which one. If I have to choose between the two, I play the spell first. I'd rather keep the other one in my hand unless I'm playing, unless like I have like a good discard. Um, I'd rather use that one first. Um, so yeah, the three Dawn turn, it's like your weakest turn. Um, so like usually like you're swinging 5 or 6 depending on the matchup. You're like playing a chump blocker, you're playing whatever searchers, and then if you expect your opponent to like maybe attack you for more than 7k, like 7k plus, like you can leave up a Dawn, right? So I'd say against Ace, for example, like I swing 6 and play a chump blocker because if my opponent is not attacking me for 6 and I can just use a 2k, like they're missing their Marco, so like their turn's already shit. So I'm okay with taking a life if their turn's already shit. Or like even using my blocker if I have like a better curve, right? Um so 5 done. First time you can use stage. Um I like to just play Saturn. Obviously, if I have to play Workery, I'm gonna play Workery. Um, but I really like to play Saturn early because I'm looking for specific cards to follow up on the next turn. Um, and then yeah, I'm like swinging, putting extra Dawn, or like leaving up Dawn, or playing another chump blocker, or searching, like just filling in the blanks. Against Ace, for the most part, I'm like swinging six. In the mirror, I'm like looking to. In the mirror, I have the other stage, so like this doesn't matter as much. I'll talk about the mirror when I get to the mirror, but yeah, against other decks where like I just need to swing five, I'm like trying to play like a two cost jump blocker or like cycle my searchers here to maximize my seven Dawn turn. From seven onward, you can play two characters a turn, so it's like often you're playing like Mars or Nuz to like deal with one of their guys, and then you're like trying to fill in with another Saturn or Mercury. Um, and then on the nine dot turn going first is usually when you like play Jupiter, try and cash in your two to three guys that you've already have in play and get like a bunch of swings. So like against Ace on my nine dot turn, very often I just go put Jupiter into play for three, eight, eight, eight. So like three more Dawn. And then with like my three Dawn remaining, like I like swing six with my leader and like leave up two for events. Or like hopefully I'm at like 19 cards in my trash already, so I can just like swing six for free and like play a jump blocker and leave up a Dawn. Um, but yeah, usually that's like the Jupiter turn. If it's not the Jupiter turn, it's usually the Jupiter turn. If it's not the Jupiter turn, you can just put in any guy. Like you can like repeat your seven Dawn turn and then like leave up extra Dawn for events. Um, and then yeah, 10 plus, you're playing Elders every turn, pretty much. Use extra Dawn to get efficient attacks. Use extra Dawn to like one of the things that I do, like if I'm playing a 10 Dawn turn Elder and I don't have a board in play, so I'll like swing with a 7K, cycle it off, play like another worker to get like the max value. Um, but other than that, yeah, just trying to get attacks off. And then once the cycle's going, I'm like trying to just like swing a bunch of eights into ace, for example, and like keep the cycle going. Or am I trying to use events early or late, or does it not matter? Um, if I can fit it into my curve, I'm going to use it. If my hand is front loaded with like if my hand is loaded with a bunch of events, I'm gonna like make the dawn to use it. If I can use never existed to protect a guy so that I can like attack with it with a Jupiter turn, I'm gonna do it. Um, but ultimately, like the decks that like swing super massive later, I actually do try and use my events early so that I can stay at a higher life. Because once I'm like blocking two and then taking one, like it's to my benefit to not have to like I'll just like find more events later. Like if I can like stay at three and then do the thing, like that's better. Going second is the nuts. Going second is just the nuts. I'm sure everyone's seen Emu going second looks like Floofy going first, right? Like Emu's the nuts going second. And why is it the nuts going second? You'd think it's because you could play your 10 drop a whole turn earlier, but it's not. It's because you can Mars on your 6 on turn, lined up to kill something that's 5 or less. And you get to play your 4 Dawn character a turn early, right? So instead of playing your first character on your 5 Dawn turn, you're playing it on your 4 Dawn turn. And then you get to follow up your 6 Dawn turn by playing a Mars and killing their two guys. And then you get to play on your 8 Dawn turn. You get to put Jupiter into play and swing at your two guys. And then you get to play the Elder. So it's like super turbo broken going second. Everything's just a turn faster. Um, Understanding how to win with Emu is like going second, just understand that your curve is the nuts. Going first, you're trying to get to do as much of the going second curve as you can. And if your opponent skips on like any part of the curve, you can you can just like take over when you go first as well. So it's like going second, you have the nuts. Going first, you have to finagle a little bit to make sure that you're like safe enough to start looping your 10. And I find that most of the time when you go first is when you need more copies of the elders because the first one kind of stabilizes you when you're going first. Whereas like when you're going second, the first one is already like from a position of advantage, right? So when you go first, you need the first one to kind of like stabilize. So you need to see more copies of it. Like you need to do it more often, right? And then going second, I'd say most of the time, two of them is good enough because like you're doing them from like you're already like winning when you do them, basically. Does that make sense? Does that all make sense, guys? All right, cool. Cool, 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 cool. Understanding the fundamentals and the gameplay. As a jack of all trades combo deck. What I mean by that is this is a deck. It ultimately is a combo deck. Combo is five elders summoning back all your stuff, right? Um, because it can do everything, it is a very much jack of all trades deck. You can play control when you need to. You can play aggressive when you need to. Um, and you can kind of like dance between the lines and do both at the same time. Very, very cool deck. Also very, very hard. um, Deck can play aggro when you need to, control when you need to, and you get to play its powerful cards for ultra, ultra, ultra cheap, right? And because I get to play my more powerful cards more often, because my bosses are all searchable, and I draw so many cards, and I will see like almost every card in my deck. I've gotten to sub 10 cards in my deck, sub 5 cards in my deck very, 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 very often, right? You can spend more of your mana on either offense or defense, depending on what you need to do, and working your way to get to your strongest defense possible so that you can like get to your 10 drop and like do your thing. Um, there's no one real set strategy on how to play Emu across every matchup all the time because really the first like 15 cards you see are going to determine kind of how you have to play each game. So so really it's like you need to play a lot of reps with the deck to kind of understand what you need to do. But yeah, pretty much pretty much because the deck is so flexible and can deal with so many different situations, understanding how to play Emu is very, very important. It's also a deck that's going to test your fundamentals more than any other deck. This is a deck where you need to make the best attacks, defend with exactly the right amount of Dawn, the right amount of blockers, take the right amount of life. Uh, you need to understand how long the game's going to last, how many turns the game's going to last, if you need to use defense or not. Like, you need to be very, very prepared and really understand not only your deck, but not only what your deck is capable of, but what the opponent's trying to do. And you want to set up your best play into their best play every time. Um, So then, yeah, from your searchers, you need to make sure that you're taking elders you don't have so that you can fill up your trash for your five elders combo. Um, so it's very important to fill up your trash not only with the pieces of your combo, but the cards that you don't want in your deck as well, because you're going to be drawing so many cards, manipulating your deck. You want it so that you thin your deck out to like cards that you need in the late game, like event counters, 2K counters, 10 drop elders, and the other card I like try and keep in my deck is additional copies of the rush, so that you have like another like rusher as like a finisher. And then filtering correctly, whether from the hand or the field, is one of the biggest skills of the deck. I go into how to do this. Uh, like in the like I think like the next slide or the slide after. So
So yeah. Um,
Any questions here?
Here are some of the pitfalls. Okay. Not leaving up dawn for events. If your hand is full of events and your opponent is going to make attacks, make sure to use events so that you don't get stuck on all events, right? That's just fun. That's good fundamental One Piece. Just like sometimes you have to use a guard point for a 1K. And knowing how your curve is going to play out really is important for that, right? Like if this guard point fits into your curve on this turn and does not fit into your curve for the next like 3 turns, either use this guard point now or you're going to have to cycle it, right? So just understanding that, very, very important. Taking too much damage in the early game. Um, Sometimes with like a good amount of time in this deck because the five elders is so strong. You want to have a cushion of like 2 to 3 life so that you can play your 10 drop healthy. And you kind of need to like build your defense going into those turns as much as you can. This is a lot of like mostly going first. Like you want to build up your defense as much as you can so you have that extra room. So I would say like going first, like you want to do your best to not take damage. So you're like throwing your chump blockers, your events, this and that to try and like stay more healthy so that by the time you play your first 10 elders and you get like control of the board, you still have a good amount of life cushion so that you can like play the game for more turns, right? Um, Conversely, not taking when it's time to take is uh is very key. So in the mirror, I try and guard like the one cards. Like I take the first one, but I try and guard like the one card swings after that because later in the game you're gonna have to get out of 2 to 3 sevens and a five every turn, and you don't just want to be taking like a five when that life could be used to soak up a seven, right? And then I try and not guard the sevens so that I can get like in the mirror, like I try and not guard the sevens if I have to use 2 cards because it doesn't really matter when I take the life, so long as I'm taking a seven, if that makes sense. Like I would rather the resources up front. Um, so if I'm not like super forced to take a bunch of sevens, like I want to like block a seven, draw a card, block another seven, counter the five. I'll probably take the last seven right up until my last life so that I have like the most amount of resources going into that last turn when they try and go like 4 9s at me, right? Like I want to have the 2Ks to get out of the nines. Um, Same thing against Zoro, right? Like I'm countering like all like the early swings, trying to stay like 4 as long as possible. And I know if I'm gonna start playing like my 10 drop, like if I go from like 4 life to 2 or even 1 life on that turn, and just like keep as many cards as I can in my hand, that way when I start like doing the elders loop, like I can like amass all my defense possible and not like play on like a really small hand. That's what I'm gonna do against Zoro. So I'm gonna defend like super 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 early, and then right when I get to the tendon is when I like take a bunch of life. Um, so yeah, really important against Zoro, really important against the mirror, knowing kind of when to take your life. So it's a big pitfall. Not playing around your opponent's best option. This is like a One Piece thing kind of in general, or even just like a card game thing in general. You have to like understand what your opponent's like best play is going to be on most turns, and then you need to preemptively play the best option to make their best option as like shitty as possible. A good example is like sometimes I'll pre-play a standing Nesjuro just because I know that if my opponent attacks with their character on the next turn, like they or like plays like a rush character on their next turn, like they get super punished if I like put in a Jupiter or something and like kill their guy. Um, right? So just like sometimes pre-playing your best play to like screw over their play, or like playing like a blocker or leaving up a Dawn on like the turns your opponent is expecting to make like their best play possible, like swing like on the sixth Dawn turn, like go Marco into Yamato swing 7/7 is like a good one, right? Like being able to like put up a blocker and leave up a Dawn, like get rid of the 2/7s and make their turn shitty, like force them to go like Jozu instead. It's like really good. Uh, so just like yeah, constantly just understand what your opponent's best play is gonna be, and then like kind of like sculpt your hand accordingly to deal with their best play. And the better you get at that skill, the more likely you are going to be able to do it to prepare for like a future turn of theirs as well. So it's like, okay, on this turn, they're going to do this, so I need to play this, so that next turn when they do this, I can play this as well. And then when they do this, I have this. Like you need to get really, really good at that skill to get the maximum amount of your emu deck possible, right? So, so yeah. Cycling the wrong card. We'll go into this deeper in just like a minute or so. Conversely, cycling from the field when you should cycle from the hand, or cycling from the hand when you should cycle from the field. Um, Doing this wrong isn't typically going to lose you games, but getting good at this skill is going to win you games because you're just going to have extra cards when it's right to sack off from your void, right? Right. How to defend the life. Understanding where you want to be on each turn of the game with the deck is the most important thing. So understand like first two turns, you want to take like one life max. Then you want to try and play a lot of the game at three life. And then if your opponent is going to overextend to get you to two life, then that's fine. That's kind of where you want to live. You don't really want to drop to like one life prior to you being set up because the first five elders is mostly going to stabilize you, right? You don't really want to like stay. You would rather stabilize at two life than one life because then like the first five elders doesn't often clear their entire board or like set you up in a way that like you're completely safe. So you would rather just like stay at two to like prevent shenanigans from happening basically, right? Like Usohachi blocker go for game or like Queena blocker go for game kind of shit. Right? Like you'd rather just be a little bit more healthy to prevent any of the nonsense, right? Um so working your way backwards from that, you kind of want to take as little damage as possible in the early mid games. So placing chump blockers and leaving up Dawn for counter events is going to be key to success in the early game, right? And then think about this deck as like a late game combo deck if you're vulnerable, where you're vulnerable if you're at under two life, right? Um, and then depending on the matchup, I take the first life. Against Ace, they don't really give you a choice a lot of the time. It's just like nine, especially when you go second, so you kind of just have to take. And then I really protect my third life in most matchups, and then I'll give up the extra. I'll leave up an extra Dawn to defend rather than push the damage. Um, like I'd rather like leave up the Dawn instead of like swing like an eight most of the time. If I can get up a blocker and use Dawn in the early game to defend, I have more. I can be more liberal to take a hit and use more Dawn if like I get like a chump blocker down and then like I protect my first life, like I'm more likely to be able to swing a bigger number on a future turn because I'm like less afraid of dying. Uh, Now defending your characters comes down to two factors. Am I gonna have to defend this character for multiple attacks, and then is the character gonna provide me more value? in the future, right? Most of the time, I'd say it's not worth it to overly defend a character unless you're getting a good value from Jupiter. That's kind of the min max, right? Because Jupiter makes it so that your character in play, like every additional character in play, is going to ask your opponent for two more cards. Uh, a lot of the time, it is worth it to defend the character for about two cards worth of value. Um, so, so yeah, that's kind of the trade-off. Um, Conversely, if your opponent isn't going to attack your character, like if their MO is like just to rush you down, similar to like Zoro or something, I often like swing with the character and then sack it off. In the Zoro case, like I just sack it off immediately, to be honest. Um, like I just use the character for the on play and I get rid of it. Um, if you're going to like if they're not going to attack with the character and they're just going to attack you, I'd rather just sack off my character for extra counter. But if the character is going to serve as a blocker, I keep it around. Like even if I'm like not going to protect the character for more than like one card, if I'm going to defend it as if it were my leader anyway, then oftentimes we're swinging with. But if like I'm just swinging with the character and I know that it's just going to get killed on the next turn and I don't really want to defend it and like the hit that it's going to like defend itself from is like such a shitty hit anyway that I'm just gonna sack off the character. Um, so and then yeah, if I'm planning to play the 10 drop, I don't often defend the character. Exception to this is if I played a Jupiter on the last turn and my opponent isn't asking me for too much to defend the character. I would rather defend the character so that the next turn I can get my two cards from the attack and then I sack it off. So like I get my two cards and then I get like a refund on one of the cards. So if I had to give up like 2 to 3 cards to defend the character, it's like fine. And then I just play the 10 drop after. It's like mostly because you have so many cards, I don't mind trading them down to defend my guys if I'm like already like going a Jupiter route. But if I'm not going a Jupiter route, I'm like way less likely to do it. Um, so yeah. Filtering with the leader skill. Alchemist requested to speak. Yeah, sure. I gave you
Oh,
the. Hey,
oh, can you hear me now?
yep.
Okay, I had a question about the going into 10 turn.
Hmm.
Um, I guess my question is like, is it does it make a difference how many characters you're sacking from your 10 cost? Like, would it be more optimal to always have like one character left going into your 10 drop turn so you could have a guy to attack and sack with for free?
That is
As opposed if you had two of them, you would be killing one of your guys basically for free, right? When you do the full sack.
so. The way that I look at it is, if the character is gonna get me two cards back, I don't mind sacking it off because then it pays for itself. But if it's just one card, like I'm not going to. Like I'll even start sacking off my guys prior to. Like I'll swing and sack.
So I guess my question is it most optimal to have only one character left going into your 10 turn just because of the fact you'd be killing more characters if you have more than one, just in general?
For the
Like
most
say if you
part,
were to defend just letting them die.
yeah, for the most part, I would say yes. However, the exception, like I said, is so I look at the entire game as like how many cards am I getting out of my opponent from like each of my attacks, right? So if I'm already like going down a Jupiter route, defending my guy makes sense to me because if I'm trading like a guard point or like a rad beam card to defend my guy, and even though I'm gonna sack off those guys to the 10 drop anyway, if each one of those swings is getting me 2 cards, and then I lose it to the 10 drop. Like I'm still net a card. Does that make sense?
No, that makes a lot of sense. So I would say even in general, would you just say that it's just like very game state dependent? Like you have to decide whether or not you actually need that extra 7 and kind of like math it out of like what that's really actually going to mean for your card advantage and things like that.
Totally.
Or like where their life is if you need that other 7.
Yeah, and like it also comes down to like the other thing that it comes down to like is am I walking down the path of a Jupiter game? Like am I doing my Jupiter on my 9 Dawn turn or am I have to make like a defensive play? If I'm making a defensive play, I'm already like swinging and sacking my guys off from the 9 Dawn turn, right? So like if I have like a couple
Yeah.
swings that I'm not doing like if I'm not like putting Jupiter and like making a bunch of like let's say against ace 8K swings, and I'm just like putting a guy Dawn on each of those guys and swinging 6/6, I'm sacking off one of those guys right after swinging that 6 immediately. So if my opponent wants to put a swing into my guy that's rested, by all means go ahead, right? But if I and like I'll just let it die, right? Because then I'll have like one swing left, I'll swing and sack, right? Is like the optimal route if I'm going down that path. But if I'm going down the Jupiter path, where like I'm using Jupiter, like every character that's in play for Jupiter is asking my opponent for 2 cards. And if I can like spend my early game wiping out like my pre Tendon turn, or like my first Tendon turn, if I'm like swinging with like 3 guys and wiping out like 6 cards for my opponent before I've even started doing my 10 drop, like that's the route that I'm gonna do, and that's where I'm like more willing to like even use my defensive events, use like even like 2K, 1K to like keep my guy around. Just because I know that even though, yeah, in like 2 seconds I'm about to sack off all these bozos for my 10 drop, I'm okay with trading down because my 10 drop is just going to give me +5 cards back. So, like, I'm really down to just trade as many cards as I can with my opponent because even against a deck like Ace where they have a million cards in their hand, they're not going to be able to deal with +5 from my Elder every turn. While I'm also asking them for
Okay.
2 cards every swing.
All right. Thank you. That
Yeah.
was like, so just to recap, it's just like so strictly game state dependent, whether or not you have to logically, there's no actual like fit answer. You literally have to just plan out the rest of your game and do what's appropriate from there.
If Jupiter, yes. If not Jupiter, see you later. For the most part, I would say. Makes it a lot easier to
Okay.
think of it like that. But yeah, pretty much game state
Thank,
dependent.
thank you.
No problem. Okay. Um, where was I here? Filter with the leader. Okay. Oh wait, I'm gonna answer the question in the chat. For Zoro matchup, do you think forcing them to use Tashigi versus Cav by not popping your own 4 drop is not worth it? Um, so I actually don't want my opponent to play Tashigi at all. Why? Because I'm assuming from the Zoro POV, they're always gonna have a Koshiro down. Otherwise, I'm winning for free. Uh, but if they have Koshiro down, it's easier for me to swing into a 6K body that I reduced to a 4 than it is for me to reduce a 7K body to a 5 and pressure that. So I would rather them even do the cav in the first place. So yeah, I'd rather just go down the other path. Like I really just like playing my Saturn, sacking it off. Like I don't want them to play Dashigi. Like they'll play it if they have to, because like still just like 7K body that also like lets their leader attack for 8 is great. But I would rather them go down the like Cavendish path because I can bully a Cavendish with Nozdro better. And in the cases where my opponent doesn't have Koshiro, um, I'm gonna kind of like punish them anyway, right? I guess if my opponent didn't play Koshiro on their, so say I'm going second, they didn't play Koshiro on their 3 dawn turn, maybe it's worth it to like play a guy to let it die on your 4 dawn turn if you can get the Tashigi out to try and sandbag it for 1 turn so that you can like Mars and deal with their guy. But it's like very niche scenario. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Um, all right. How to filter with the leader skill. All right. So we have the Sakazuki leader ability, meaning we're gonna have to really be good at card selection. All right. So card selection in One Piece is like one of the most important skills, and it's something that gets tested every single game. Every time you play a searcher, you are presented with options that will change your entire game, right? Which card you take on which search will change the entire game. So you need to have really good understanding of what you're trying to do on each of the turns, what your opponent is trying to do on each of the turns, and and really kind of like base your game off of that. So because card selection is a skill that's being tested constantly throughout the game, just from searchers, you naturally get a little bit better at the skill over time. But when you have the Sakazuki kind of filter loot ability, you really have to get good at it because every single card that you have, you are now given the option to just like pitch it for a fresh card, right? So if the card in your hand is not going to be good for your game plan, you have to be ready to just like get off of it. And I know it seems really tempting to keep all your good cards in your hand because like it gives you so many options, but you need to just like really get good at deciding which plan you're going to go with and like keeping cards that stick to that plan and like having like a really good multi-turn plan, right? So and then just trying to get rid of anything that doesn't immediately like stick to that plan, right? So you need to, yeah, you need to be really good at that. Blackbeard taught you that, and have your plan and go with it. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's just like the stage from Blackbeard, right? Um, if you don't plan on using the card in like the next 2, 3 turns at the most, you have to get off of that card. So once you've like decided, okay, I'm gonna use this card as part of my plan, I'm gonna use this card to counter, I'm gonna use this card as like a blocker on this turn, and like you've like thought about all your other cards, you need to like use your leader ability to like cycle to get you towards the pieces that you're missing. And sometimes uh you need to realize that all your characters have that same pseudo text on it too, right? So not only not only do you have to decide from, let's say, like 5 or 6 cards in your hand, which one is the weakest one, you also have to look at your board and say, okay, is it weaker to have this character on the board versus this card in my hand, right? So your card selection and like really understanding how to play the game skills are getting omega ultra tested with this deck. Okay, so yeah. Um, requires you to accurately predict what your opponent's going to do, what you're going to do in response, how they're going to respond, and how you're going to respond to their response. If you can kind of keep that like 2 turn cycle in play and ask yourself that every single turn, you're going to get really good at this skill really, really quickly. Um, so yeah, the shortcut that I use is, am I going to play the card in the next 2 turns? Uh, is the card essential to my game plan? What is my opponent likely to play? What is my opponent likely to play the turn after? Right? And then the hardest question that this deck kind of asks you is when you have to cycle from your field. Certain decks tell you straight up, like Zoro, right? You don't want to leave just one rested character in play against Zoro, right? So just play your character for the on play and then immediately cycle it back to get the card back, right? Like Saturn against Zoro is just Sanji's peel off. Like you want to see as many Saturns as you can, so you can build up as many cards as you can to counter as many hits as you can to build up your trash, blah blah blah, as much as you can, right? So certain decks do it for you. Um, Other examples are: am I playing against a deck that is going to attack my board? Or like, am I playing against a deck that is going to just purely attack my face? If my opponent is playing a deck that's purely going to attack my face, I would rather swing with my guy to like help me board control and then sack it off to recoup the card so I have more counter to defend myself, right? Alternatively, you don't always want to sack off your board against the aggressive decks if they're like playing a deck that needs board control. Like if you're playing against a deck that needs board control, keeping your guys in play to like clear their guys is good. But if you're playing a deck that's just gonna like rush you down and go life, swing with your character, sack it off is like ideal. So like pretty much like Zoro, right? Um, and then conversely, like, is this the I asked myself, is this character in play worse than a card in my hand? A lot of the times the answer to that question is no, because you want a Jupiter, ideally. And if you're playing a matchup where you're not gonna get to Jupiter like an aggressive deck or something, then or just like the way that your hand pans out, like you don't think you're gonna be able to get 2 to 3 guys in play to Jupiter, then it like swinging and sacking your guys is like more reasonable, right? Um, are you gonna need to play around putting? Would you rather have the guy in play? Like these are more of the questions that you want to ask yourself, right? Um, if I'm gonna defend the character as if it was my leader, like if I would rather keep the character around, I'm obviously not gonna sack it off, right? If the character in play is just going to get sacked off in 2 turns to the 10 drop, and I'm not going down a Jupiter path. Swing and sack, swing and sack, swing and sack. Best way to do it, right? Imagine you could like swing with a Bonkley and sack it off, like these like one swing kind of characters that would just die, like might as well swing and sack, right? Um, if you're not going to defend the character and just like let it die, um, consider if your opponent's going to swing 5 into 5 and you're going to let it die, I'd probably just sack it off to get the card. If your opponent's going to swing 7 into it, I leave it in play because it serves as a blocker that trades for 2 cards. Like defends for 2 cards worth of value, right? If my opponent's going to attack it a bunch of times at like varying sizes, I like ask myself, like, first of all, that's normally a question of like, do you even swing with that character in the first place? But you have the option now of like, not only can you swing with the character, you can not swing with the character, you can swing with the character and sack it off. Like you have to like really, really, really understand your gameplay fundamentals to decide whether or not you're going to sack off a character. Because most of the time you don't want to sack off your own stuff in play, right? I would imagine most of the time you don't want to do it. However, I've given a bunch of exceptions to when you actually should do it. So yeah, there you go. I'd rather my opponent attack my character than my leader. Like I said, like if they're going to attack at 7, I keep it in play. If I'm going to attack it and defend it, I'm going to keep it in play. If I'd rather my character die so I can take a life, I'm going to sack off the character. If I'm not going to defend it 5 on 5, I'm going to sack off the character because I'd rather just like have the 1K and like use the 1K, right? Um, Removing your own tempo is expensive, like I said.
you don't want to spend all this mana on characters to just like tribute them off. So do it only if it makes sense, only if it really fits in in like the right guidelines, the right understanding of the deck. Any questions on this? I know this is kind of complicated, so I really want to talk about this one. I see someone typing, so I'm just waiting. Definitely a big situational thing. Yeah, no, it is situational. Is there a common matchup besides Zoro where sacking characters is common? Um, if I am playing the one cost stage and I'm like playing a 9 drop on 9, um, I'm like sacking my characters off from that turn. Like if I'm like preemptively going to sack off my guys so that I can do like my 10 drop. So like if I'm like swinging with a guy on my like 8 or 9 down turn in preparation for the 10 drop and I have like two of them, I'm gonna sack one off. And the next turn I'm gonna swing and sack one off is like the ideal, right? Um Other than that, stuff like where they're going like full face. Against Rayleigh, it comes up a lot where like I've played a couple characters out and I've like stabilized. I like start swinging and sacking with those guys so that I can like build up like I don't need like three guys in play against the Rayleigh once I've stabilized. So like I just start like sacking them off to like recoup the hand back so that I can like defend more swings when they inevitably transition from like whatever they're doing to like only life, right? So if my opponent is gonna like start going only life is like when I start to get off of my guys. All right, cool. Using the leader skill, the stage, the stage selection. So most of the time you're picking the 7 cross stage. Uh, Against aggressive decks like Plouffe and Rayleigh, when you're going first, I like taking the 1 cost stage, mostly because you can line up Mars on like a good turn against them. So, and the matchups where like going first and Marsing them is more important than having Dawn up at the end stages of the game for your like post 10 drop. I would rather just have like the turn 3 Mars kill their guy. And like those are like Plouffe Rayleigh limb kind of decks where I just want to like play my 1 cost stage, play my thing, pop their guy, blow them the fuck out early. So, yeah. And then in the mirror, you have to pick that one because the 7 cost stage like would get popped by the other card. So yeah, just pick the 1 cost stage. Yeah, and then like I said, you only really want the one going first, so you can do like Saturn Mars curve going first.
So like it is expensive. You're giving up your ability to like do your 10 Dawn play for 3 Dawn. Um, but it is worth it in those matchups. And like it's almost to like no cost for us to just have that stage in our deck to do it. So yeah, just know when you want to do it, be ready to do it. See an aggressive leader lose the dice roll, have to go first, pull the trigger, pull the other stage, ready to go. Time to battle. And then obviously, like any matchup where you're like really inclined to go first, it's often because you want to pull the one cost stage. But very, very rarely are you like electing to go first, unless it's because like you're playing against like Ploofy or whatever, right? Ploofy Lim, whatever, where you just really want to take the first and go with the other stage. Get the most squeeze out of the lemon type of situation. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. If you're not planning on protecting the bodies, just sack or use them as a blocker. Yep, that's exactly right. Awesome. Seems like you're getting it, guys. Seems like you're getting it. Awesome. Cool, cool, cool. All right, matchups. Beating Ace, go second. So Ace is one of the few decks where we don't necessarily have the inevitability. Because while we do kind of like wreck their hand every turn with the 10 drop, like we can really only do it like 4 times. And if they play like, if they manage to get like 2 or 3 of the 10 drop blockers into play, like they really stemmy our aggression. So you want to like really, really pressure them prior to that point so that they can't just like get like 3 or 4 blockers in play and then play a Roger. That's like really when you're in trouble. So against Ace, you need to be like aggressive, 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 right? Um, so yeah, we need to be pressuring against Ace right from the start. Just because he's a 6K, 6 life, or he's basically a 6 life leader because when he takes life, he draws 2 instead of 1. So he's essentially just like the modern day Edward Newgate, right? And the best way to beat Edward Newgate, even though he got all of his cards up front, was just as many instances of damage as possible, right? What I mean by that is 6 6 6 6 6 6 6. Very similar to like UP Luffy, very similar to GP Luffy. 6 6 6 6 6 6 6, right? Just run their options out, and then Ace is a very heads up deck. Doesn't often play defensive events. At the most, plays like 2 radical beams. So, and I would say like most of the time they don't play the radical beams. So eights are really good too, because it's just like 8 8 8 8 8 8 8. You're just asking for 2 cards per swing. Swing, 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 swing. Wipe as many cards out as you can as possible against. Right? Uh, so yeah, they don't often give your 2Ks any value. Exception to this is when they're going second. You get like value from your 2Ks like 4 on turn, 6 on turn. Other than that, they're often attacking way too big for your 2K counter, so they force you to leave up event counter. Um, and the end game often looks like 1 to 2 10 costs, 1 9 costs, and they've been stalling for an 8K leader as multiple turns as much as they can. They're pressuring you. They basically have to be up an 8K leader for as many turns as they can. Otherwise, you're going to wipe them out for so many cards. Um, so yeah, you need to be able to like pressure them to drain as much as you can. You need to be able to brave multiple. You need to be brave multiple turns. You can't leave up like infinite dawn. You need to like get as many eights as possible, which means leaving up very few dawn actually. So you really only want to like leave up your event counter on like the last turn, maybe like the last 2 turns. You need to get as many cards from Ace's hand as possible. Can you talk playing versus Ace?
when they get to one life, how to pressure and get cards versus them taking and having a good Roger turn. Um, so it all kind of goes back to overall game plan. And what I mean by that is understand how they kind of close out against you, right? If they play a Roger and you're at 2 life, they have to have at least one excess swing over your life. Because you get out of the 6K swing for free. You get out of the leader swing for free, basically, right? So you need to get it. So if you have 3 life, you need to get out of 112. Or if you have 2 life, you need to get out of 112 if they have like 12K, 12K, 13K, right? You need to get out of 1. Alternatively, if you're at 1 life now, you need to get out of 2. So you need to do a really good job of making sure that you don't open yourself up to getting put to 1 life, because when you get to 1 life, that's when you're in trouble. If you can stay at 2 life, I'd say you're safe enough that you can really be aggressive against them. Versus when you're at 1 life, you need to leave up like typically 3 to 4 of the counter, so you don't get the pressure nearly as much. So you want to stay as healthy as you can early to make sure that you can drain as much of their cards as possible, as many turns as possible. Like you need to be safe enough on all of the turns so that you don't just get like put to 1 or 0, or even like mostly just put to 1, right? Like put to 1 is basically game. So if you think about being put to 1 as basically game, obviously you're gonna do whatever you can to stay at 2, right? Does that make sense? So you just pressure, 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 pressure. Stay at 2. Um, Part 2 of Ace. When you go first, you need to play in a way that gets ahead of their I am Whitebeard. So what I mean by get ahead of it is you need to play in a way that you're getting the most, like you basically almost punish them for playing their best card on 8, right? So so I say ace is so consistent they will always have it. Obviously they're not always going to have it, but because they draw so many cards and search so many cards and blah blah blah, blah, they're gonna have it a lot of the time. So when I say always, it's like kind of facetious, but like let's just say always is always, right? So I play in a way to play around the I am Whitebeard combo as much as I possibly can by getting ahead of it. What does that mean? I'm like playing towards it as early as I can. I'm getting down a cheap blocker early. I'm like developing my board in a way on my 7 Dawn turns that I can play Jupiter and get as many cards as I can when they do their I am Whitebeard. So say they I am Whitebeard, right? If I have like 2 to 3 standing guys going into their I am Whitebeard turn, I play Jupiter. Like I'm getting like 3 or 4 8s on those turns, and that's typically good enough. But I need to make sure that I don't go to 1 life, right? Obviously, so I need to defend. I defend against ace really, really early and like preemptively set up defense with like chump blockers and stuff, so that on my 7 to 9 Dawn turn, I can pressure as much as I can into the I am Whitebeard before I go for my 10 drop, right? Um, so I kind of work my way backwards from there, right? So if I'm planning on getting a Jupiter down and getting like a Nezero down and like really like pressuring 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, that means on my 7 and 9 Dawn turns, I'm kind of vulnerable, right? So if that means I have to play my chump blockers out early and not block with them, or like keep up event counter early and just like trade with my event counter early, then that's where I'm focused more than overall just trying to
Like really, really early, I'm super defensive, and then so that I can like be a bit more liberal with my life on like 7 to 9 on turn. Like I just need to make sure I don't go below 2. Right? So if that means I'm staying at 4 life until my 7 dawn turn, so be it, right? So that on my like 7 to 9 dawn turn, I can take 1 to 2 damage. That makes sense? Um, kind of like how the way that I like compare it is I know that like some of you said you were Blackbeard players, right? You know how like as a Blackbeard deck, sometimes you would play out like your Van Augur or your Doc Q so that on your next turn you can play the other piece and like punish your opponent for playing their on curve play. It's like the same concept with different cards. Instead of like punishing them by like killing their guy or whatever, you're punishing them by like if they play their on curve play, they're like taking like 4/8 on that turn. Make sense? So like I'm really planning to play ahead of the I am Whitebeard turn. Because that's the main advantage. The I am Whitebeard turn on the 8 dawn turn is like where Ace gets any advantage at all. Okay. Okay, okay. Seems like you guys are getting the idea. Cool, cool, cool. Um, all right, part 3. Going second, much easier. Play your natural curve, pressure a lot, bunch of 6K swings. Saturn, Mars killed Marco Yamato, whatever their 5 dawn play was. They don't have a 3 dawn play. So now you have 2 guys to their nothing. They play their first guy. You get to you get to play Jupiter, just get to swing, you get to win for free. Only thing is here, just play around pudding. So on their 3 dawn turn, try and get a chump blocker down if you can on your 2 dawn turn, or like if you can't do that, play like your 1 cost searcher and then don't sack it off until later, like I said earlier, to like play around the hedge against the pudding a little bit. So yeah, just like bank the card on your field, if that makes sense. And then yeah, build up counter events towards the end of the game. You can play a bit longer of a game when you go second because you take the board so early. You like very often get to play going second at like 3 life most of the game because they just don't have a board. Kind of brutal for them. So yeah, take the steps to play around pudding. Play out Mars on 6 dawn turn if you can to pop their first play, and you just pretty much win. Um, Emu takes second. Uh, Emu Mirror is often all about tempo. The battles are fought before 10 dawn. You want to, there's like 2 phases of the game. There's like the pre and post 10 dawn turns. You want to go into the 10 dawn turns with as many cards as possible, bleed as little as you can. Very similar to the BY mirror, actually, where the entire point of the BY mirror was to get to when you guys are both like looping Gecko Morios on each other with as many cards as possible. It's like very, very similar here. Like you want to like win the board as much as you can, deal as much damage as much as you can early in the game to your opponent's like card economy, so that when you both are doing your inevitable like 10 dawn turn, like both of you playing 10 drop over and over and over and over every turn, you both get into the late game with as many resources as possible, and you're trying to do your best job to like make your opponent go into the late game with as few resources as possible, right? So board control very important. Why board control very important if everyone's just going to revive all their shit every turn? Well, because in the early stages of the game, if you can board control your opponent, then that's 1 less card that they're asking from you, and then all of your characters get to swing back into your opponent without being pressured back, right? So board control good. Nudge Juro is the main catch-up mechanic early in the mirror. Uh, if your opponent has the ability to like get ahead of you a little bit, and like say like they have like 2 or 3 guys to like your 1 or 2 guys, Nudge Juro basically means that you get to take out whatever guy that they attacked with, right? So super super good. Mars, uh, it's like a check in the early game. If your opponent, if you or your opponent can't get to 7 cards in the trash, your 4 drop is getting fucking destroyed by Mars and you like lose. So try and do as much as you can to avoid this scenario. Um, if you go second, you might have to like counter out of your first life swing to get the prerequisite cards in your trash. So it's like one searcher, 1 cycle gets 4 in your trash. Uh, on your next turn, you cycle, that's 5. If you play the chump blocker for 1, that's 6. And if you counter your first life, that's 7, so you're safe. Conversely, going first, you don't get asked that question as much because your first turn, like by the time your opponent gets to actually do it, you've gotten to cycle 3 times. So if you played any one searcher, you're already at 6. If you counter 1 swing, you're at 7. So going first is less important. Going second is more important, just to be able to get to that 7 trash. Um, it's all about finagling the board to get the best Jupiter possible. So understanding that's kind of what the mirror is about. Like you are swinging with your board to get your opponent to swing back into you so that you can swing back. Is it better to keep the 4 drop standing on 6 after playing the 2 or attack? So I like to attack with my stuff to try and get my opponent to attack with their stuff, and then I do my best to reduce as much material from both players as possible. Um, I want my opponent to attack with their stuff so that I can like, if my opponent's only going to be attacking 5s on those turns, like I want to defend. I want to like swing with my guys preemptively to get my opponent to attack into my rested guys with their guys, so I can counter to defend, and then I can play like Nozdro or Jupiter or something that like lets me take the board back. So like I'm trying to do my best to get both players to trade as many cards into each other as possible. And I know that I'm going to navigate the situation myself personally to a better win condition. Make sense? Yes, thank you. Awesome. Yeah, so what happens conversely if you're like leave your guy standing, then your opponent also leaves his guy standing, and then one of you has to like push the button on Jupiter and go, and it's like really weird to do because like you need because like the person that does it, if they didn't like win the board prior, like they're gonna lose all their guys. Or like if you like hold your guys back too long and your opponent plays Jupiter and like attacks you like 3 or 4 times for 7, then even if you take the board back, your opponent just plays their first 10 drop and like they've already done too much damage to you, like to your hand or your life. So you don't get like they basically expended your life, which I almost look at as like free blocks in this matchup, right? So it's like they expend too much of your life, and then yeah, it just ends up bad for you. That's why I attack to get them to attack so that I can attack their stuff back. So like instead of like starving, I like try and force the issue. Player going first needs to win tempo as much as they can so they can play a standing 5 elders. So that they can like play a 5 elders and then like on the next turn like swing with their board, sack the 5 elders, play another swing with the rusher, sack the rusher off for the leader skill, and then play a 5 elder standing. And then the basically when they do that, they get like 1 turn eventually. They don't have to claim it necessarily right away, but they get 1 turn eventually where they can like leave up all of their Dawn, or conversely make incredibly big attacks. So you need to like not let them comfortably play a 9-drop because you can get stuck in a loop that's like not pretty for you. So you going second need to like win the tempo so that your opponent doesn't get to do that. And then conversely, when you're going first, you need to do whatever you can to get that 9 down comfortably. Okay? Uh, Roger. All right, 2K counters, very important against Roger because of how the leader works. They're basically always going to attack for 6 in the first like 3 turns. Other than that, you want to just play your regular curve. You want to use your, I don't know why it autocorrected to that. It's you want to use your trump blocker in the early game, not your trump blocker, your trump blocker in the early game, so that you can play for like get defense and play for the future turns, right? Otherwise, like you need to spend all your Dawn. Like you want to just like develop your board, develop blockers, use your event counters, stay healthy, because their guys get too big to some point that like you're gonna be in trouble, right? Um, Nuzjuro very important. I like to get a Nuzjuro in play and protected because Nuzjuro with the Jupiter in play is kind of your like equalizer for their stuff. And then the other thing that I like to do is once I use Nuzjuro to get like to help me board control and like I'm like set up in like a comfortable spot, I try and swing out with my board and then play a 10 drop standing. Why do I try and do that? Because Roger doesn't have hard removal. So I can use the 10 drop for like board control before like sacking it off and going again. And if I have like a Nuzjuro in play, and then I play like a standing 10 drop, like I can get like a reduction on a guy, and then like I can swing with my 10 drop, and then I can sack off the 10 drop, and then get like another Nuzjuro in play, and then like I can, and then like once you get the loop of having a standing 10 drop in play, you can always end your turn the next turn with like another standing 10 drop in play plus your board. So it's like you need to like finagle a way to get the 10 drop in play and not necessarily have to use it right away so that you can use the big 12k body to help you board control your opponent's bodies in this matchup. Also comes up against ace. So, yeah. Um, Mars lets you take a bullet. It's a blocker otherwise. Trying to get Jupiter pressure going while your opponent's ramping is like a good way to like beat up on your opponent before when you're going first. Then when you go second, you just want a Saturn Mars convert into a victory. All right. Going second is just Saturn Mars simulator. Um, but yeah. Okay. Beating Zoro. Zoro's like the one matchup you should really be playing differently from the start. Zoro is built to be a hyper aggro deck in the new meta. You need to do whatever you can to kind of slow down their aggression. I try and stay as healthy as I can, countering out as many 1-card swings as I can. And then I try and spam as many Saturns with the stage as much as I can to cycle for my pieces and sack them off to get the 2 cards immediately. Um, I use Mars and the guard point to like deal with characters. If they have Koshiro, I try and remove the Koshiro. If it's not going to cost me too many cards, just because like getting rid of the Koshiro now means like I prevent them from having double Koshiro in the future. Um, Also, if I can like get rid of the Koshiro now and they don't have another one, I can use a future Mars on a future turn to deal with like a real threat. Um, you can play out Jupiter on 7 Dawn. It's something that they can't Tashigi. So you have like one swing that can help you, like one swing, one turn that can help you like board control. Um, and then use that in Nuzjuro on one turn to help you deal with like their arrested guys. Um, and then try and use like Mars to deal with Koshiros and Zoros. I always starve them. I just don't want the Zoro opponent to have as many cards. Like, I want to like reduce the amount of chance that my opponent gets as many like 4-cost Zoros as possible. That's the most annoying card for this deck. Um, and then yeah, I'm just like trying to remove and simplify and stay alive as much as I can against Zoro because once I play like 2 10 drops against them, I can kill them in like 2 turns. So like I don't need to like play for a like I don't need to like rush them down or anything because like once I've controlled them completely, like there's nothing they can really do. Um yeah, just play around DMG and Queen at the end. One of the things that I like to do to play around Queena is I just like play a second blocker. So on my 10 Don turn, I put the 10 cost in play. Most of the time, you don't have a board going into that turn. I'd say like 99% of the time, you don't have a board going into that turn. So I swing with the Nuzjuro, and then I sack it off to get a card back to my hand. And then then I'll have like 6 Dawn, and then I'll play like a War Fury, right? So if my opponent's plan is to go like swing big with like their leader twice, like I can double block even if they have like Queena, or like I can triple block if their plan was to go like 12-12. Like I can like I basically like force them to not do that. Um, and then yeah, just try and close out the game in 2 turns after that. It's like actually pretty easy to close out the game when you have 5 7K bodies and your opponent has 2 cards in there. So pretty easy. This is one of your best matchups. Just get used to playing it a couple times. You'll see it's like super easy. Just Saturn, sack it off. Saturn, sack it off. Nuzjuro, put it into play. Rush, reduce one of their guys. Sack it off. Swing into the rusty guy after they blocked once or countered. Counter out with like your defense as much as you can, and then play your 10 drop. 10 drop kills like 3 guys. The turn it comes into play, and then uh yeah, just win. Um, Bonnie. Bonnie in this set's a cheese deck. The only win condition they have against you really is playing a 9-cost Zoro. So other than just putting Stussy in your deck, is pressure them to the point where they can't play it, which means you're going to be playing for a Jupiter game. So just like get out 2 guys. Um, Saturn, Mars, Gaming going second, going first. Swings, swing 7, play a guy. Swings, and then just like fill out your board with like 2 guys on 7 on turn, 2 guys on the 9 on turn, and pressure. Um, yeah, just go for that game plan. It's really easy against Bonnie. They can't go for Kid. Nazuro deals with Kid. Mars deals with Cavendish and Carrot. Just play your normal game. Bonnie can't beat you. Um, Nothing they can really do once you're at like once you put like 5 guys in play too. So yeah. Um, all right. Any more questions before I wrap it up? Can I talk about Lim? Seems like it's played a lot more in a legendary counter of Emu and Ace. Go first. Play your 1-cost stage. Saturn, Mars. I actually talked about it earlier. Any of the aggressive decks where you like want to play your one cost stage, you want to just go first and like Saturn, Mars get board control. Saturn, Mars, Nuzjuro like just crushes Limb. I've actually had no trouble playing against that matchup because I understood right from the get-go um, that I have to play against it like I would play against another aggressive deck, right? So so yeah, it's just go first, Saturn, Mars, Nuzjuro Gaming. What about the Nami that can rest our Dawn so we can't 10 drop and pop in the same turn? I'm trying to get I'm trying to get nine I'm trying to get ahead of their like I get ahead of them to the point where I can play like a 9 drop on 9 if I'm not under any pressure, if that makes sense. So that I can do like the busted stuff. Um Lim wants to take second from us apparently. Let him. They're probably doing that because they're not expecting me to like put out the one cost stage and go first. Against Ace going first, is it bad to play a standing 10 drop in case of Red Rock? So what I try and do against Ace is I try and navigate to the point where I can get a 10 drop in play comfortably behind the back of another 10 drop. So what that often looks like is my first 10 drop builds my board, and then I like block one, counter one, whatever, right? Leave up the Mars if I can, ideally. And then on my next turn, I stage into play a 10 drop, and then I play a Warcury. So that's like 7 Dawn. Try and get a couple of swings in that I can, and then like play it like that so that I'm still like getting value from my board. And then like on the follow up turn is like when I like swing with my board as many good numbers as I can, sack it off play, and then like keep the loop going. I don't risk the 10 drop if it's my only 10 drop because you often need to do a 10 drop to get into another 10 drop. Any other questions? Can you go over the one cost Shirahoshi and how we're supposed to use the card effectively? So the infinite late game with Shirahoshi thing is kind of fake. What isn't fake is you often see the first cards you send back from Shirahoshi. So I try and send back like Radical Beams and Guard Points because that's like the kind of cards that I want at the end of the game. Um, I try and look for squeezing the card into play on a turn where my opponent is going to uh, have to swing into it. Otherwise, I'm using the card to trade for one of my opponent's cards and um like pretty close to immediate. So say like I already have like my 10 drop play and like I have like my elders in play. Like on the next turn, that's like a good turn for one Dawn to use Shirahoshi for to trade with one of their cards in their hand. Because one Dawn for one card is a good deal. Most of the time you have to spend 2 Dawn to get a card just in general. So if you can use 1 Dawn to get a card and then like put a couple guys back, like put a couple cards back in your deck, it's super good. Otherwise, look for opportunities where your opponent doesn't have a searcher to get the card down and like rip a card from their hand and occupy a leader swing. Or like sometimes you can like hard lock your opponent too if you can get down the Shirahoshi behind a blocker and they don't have like small swings into it, if that makes sense. Even like opportunities where your opponent has their leader swing and they have one searcher and you have like a war Curie and they try and swing with the searcher into your Shirahoshi and you block with the war Curie, like free block. That way they have to put the leader swing into it. That's the kind of scenarios that you're looking to get that extra value from Shirahoshi. Though most of the time you're doing it like post 10 drop to get a card out of their hand before you start like ripping cards from their hand. What would I say Emu's hardest matchup is? The dice roll. When when Emu loses the dice roll against Ace, that's the hardest matchup. But if Emu wins the dice roll, it's like favorite against anybody. But here's the thing, it's not a dice roll deck because playing your game plan going first and understanding how to play going first is like where all the skill in the deck is pretty much. Because like I said, when you go second, it's literally just Saturn Mars gaming and you just win basically. So understanding how to get into a position where you can navigate going first to win, that's where the skill is. All right. Any more questions or before we wrap it up? No? All right. Good night, everybody.